left home early for the market today. I think largely because the football was on, so I was awake. And so you can see it's still dark. Sun's just beginning to come out. We've had a little bit of rain, but I think I'll remain dry. I brought a coat or jacket just in case. But yeah, it's only just after 5 at the moment. So sometimes I don't leave till 6. I try and leave at 5:30, but I've got quite a lot to do, so maybe I won't get back any earlier. But anyway, it's rather nice at this time. You can see it's beginning to get a bit lighter now. It's nearly 5:30. So yeah, it's getting a little bit lighter. There's still quite a lot of people around, you know. Many people get up for what we call shubu, other Muslims would call asar prayers, so early morning. Many people get up at that time, but also it being market day or pon, people get up early to go to the market. So when I get down to the market, it'll be full, you know, it'll be in full swing. I'll get there about 6 o'clock, I guess, but it probably started shortly after Asar, so just after 4:30. So yeah, people wake early in the mountains. And twice I used the word Asar when I should have used the word Fajr. Asar is actually the afternoon prayer, and I meant the early morning prayer, which is Fajr. And I know I'd be picked up on it, so I thought I'd better correct it. Now, something that people don't tend to comprehend if they live in far northern climes, I suppose far southern, but there aren't that many. But you know, people in northern Europe in particular, Canada, wouldn't understand that both daybreak and nightfall happen very quickly on the equator. I mean, we're talking of minutes from being completely dark to what the eye would perceive as completely light. The camera doesn't really show it. I mean, it's not completely light yet. We're just at that intermediate stage, but it happens extremely quickly. Now, in 8 days' time, we have elections, well, the presidential election, and therefore everywhere is plastered with posters. So you can see this station, as they call it. Oh, there's even a speaker in there. But yeah, this station, it's not really for buses, it's for meeting, particularly at times of danger, but plastered with these political posters. And you know, they're everywhere. Here's my relative's house with a poster outside. And when you go to vote, they dye your finger blue. Say dye, it's probably just some ink, you know. But people are expected to vote. I'm not certain my wife will, but people are expected to. So you see, here's some more posters, and they're everywhere. It's not just presidential. There will be a local elections as well at the same time. Now, I said my wife might not vote, and in a country where it's seen as bad form not to vote, you might be asking why. Well, they don't make it easy, basically. Everybody has to be registered at a main address, and that's where they must vote. So my wife's main address is in Jakarta, and we're currently in Java. Now, we could get back to Jakarta on time, but you know, she's not really that bothered, and she doesn't know where her paperwork is to vote, nor where she should vote. There you go, it's getting light now. So speaking of the election, well, they do get very passionate here in Indonesia, and far be it from me to cast any doubt on the candidates or, you know, on the political process here. I can't really see why. But they get very worked up. The religion or the Muslim card hasn't been played that strongly this time, nor has hatred of minorities, although inevitably it occurs every election. And of course, being one of those minorities, you know, I tend to feel it every election, and it doesn't bounce back after the election wanes. But as I say, this one does seem to have been a little bit less aggressive. And I guess many of you will not let me get away with my comment, why do people get so worked up about the elections? So, just as an outsider, and it's only my opinion, but every election that I've been in Indonesia for feels like a foregone conclusion, or certainly the presidential result does, and no more so than this one. So, you know, as an outsider, I just couldn't get worked up about it, because it doesn't seem that it means much if it's a foregone conclusion. Probably it's the same everywhere, isn't it? It's probably a reflection on how the democratic process is everywhere. I'm not sure. So, I hadn't quite got to the market and it started raining. Hopefully it won't last long, but rain is very rarely light in Indonesia. Unfortunately, I brought a jacket, which I've just put on, and I'm here in this shelter with a man on a motorcycle who's doing exactly the same thing. And I'll wait out until the worst is gone. I think it's probably even finishing now, but we might get some more on my journey back, certainly. My wife will be worrying, but I keep saying I'm from Manchester. She doesn't seem to understand. Well, it's still raining, and you can see some more posters here. And one of the reasons I believe it's a foregone conclusion, although it might go to a second round because there is some tactical voting being proposed, and that is that there's so many parties in Indonesia, it's inevitably a coalition, and the coalitions get formed largely prior to the election. So one powerful coalition has emerged, whereas the two other incumbents for the presidential election is where the tactical voting is being proposed. Now, I said I woke up early because of the football. Maybe it's not just that. Our news, not just news, feeds on this platform are all about war. Now, I had premonitions over 4 years ago about war, and as I'm looking at it now, it feels like those premonitions were correct. Doesn't mean that war's inevitable, because if we don't believe it is, I suspect it's not. But yeah, these premonitions are forming again. And I think we have to say whose interest is war, whose interest does it serve? Because for the last 4 years it's been obvious that the elite have been at war with their own populations. But maybe this is to get us on a war footing, to divide us into tribes. But there's no doubt that if there is war, the world order would change yet again. I suspect ultimately this would form a bipolar world yet again. And I suspect that some countries are being goaded into war. But whose interest does it all serve? I can't see it being in the interest of the common people. You know, many countries will disappear. Many countries will go through very, very hard times. And it's inevitably the poor in those countries who suffer the most. And I think we have to see war in that light. That it isn't really about, well, it is about international relations, but we have to question, are we really a part of a nation state? Or are we just subjected to what these nation states want us to do and believe? Well, it's still raining, as you can see, but I've got my jacket on and it's nearly 6 o'clock. So I think maybe I ought to set off again. It's not too far to the market now, but I'll get wet, but if I leave it too late, I'll get soaked from sweat walking back, so I think I might as well set off yet again. Well, I've set off, and as you can see, it's still raining. I am getting a little bit wet, but you know, the wettest bit is it's coming through my shoes. Now, I normally wear rubber shoes for this occasion, but as you may know, we've bought a lovely little kitten. I think she's coming into childbearing sort of age. So all the local Toms have been outside our house. And when I went to put on my shoes, I realised that one had peed on my rubber shoes. So I put on another pair of shoes that I don't wear that often. And they're not bad, but I can feel the water coming through them. But, you know, as I say, I get wet anyway. Another thing I should say, in terms of this sort of foregone conclusion of the election, if it was known that war is coming, quite possibly the incumbent for the election is actually, oh, there's another poster, quite possibly the incumbent would be the best bet for Indonesia. Even though in all probability Indonesia, along with the rest of Southeast Asia, would remain neutral. But you know, it'll be hard times for Southeast Asia, and so maybe I can understand why one particular candidate has emerged so important. And you can hardly see, I think there's water on my lens. So everybody's looking at this crazy westerner, not sheltering from the rain. And here's Barcinco, and you can see she's well tucked up here in the rain. It's getting quite heavy now, so I'm going to move on. You might be asking, why did I even bother setting off where it looked like rain? And well, it was, I wanted to buy a ticket to get back to Jakarta. Okay, it's a few days' time, and I could have gone at another time, but I like walking at Pon, and as I say, crazy though the locals think, I'm from Manchester, so I'm used to walking in and out. Yeah, I bought a ticket for us both to go to Jakarta at a cost of, what, $5 for the two of us. Have I got that right? Do you know I have, yeah. That includes lunch. You knew I got it wrong, didn't you? $5 for the two of us. $25 for the two of us. Yeah, still a bargain. Particularly when you think it includes lunch. 12-hour journey as well, you know. So we're going on one of these buses, but in a few days' time. Well, I'm on my way back now, and I thought I might mention to you, I don't want to cast too many aspersions on the electoral system in Indonesia, but certainly last election, everybody in our hamlet was paid about $4 to vote in a certain way. I think such practices are dying out, but they still exist. And so that's part of the reason why everybody in our hamlet voted last time. But of course, with my wife being registered in Jakarta, she wasn't even offered the $4. So maybe that explains her reluctance to join in. Now, I've just had something of a difficult choice to make. Do I keep my jacket on and get soaked to the skin through sweating? Or do I take it off and potentially it starts raining badly again? Well, I've decided to take it off, and I'm reminded of what my mother used to say to me. Probably your mother used to say to you. You better take an umbrella or it'll rain. And I think that tale of the umbrella is a little bit how I feel about war. If we don't feel there's going to be a war, maybe there won't be. And you know, I said about the incumbent president maybe being the best person if we know there's going to be a war. And I feel about it a bit like Winston Churchill. My family would be no fans of Winston Churchill, but I think most people felt he was the right person to have as Prime Minister during a war. And I guess it's the same thing, but if we don't believe there will be war, maybe we can avoid it. You may be pleased to know, maybe not, I made the right call in terms of taking my jacket off, because it's not rained heavily again. And yes, I am soaked to the skin, but from sweat, and I'm nearly home now. Could this be a metaphor for how we all should be, with all this warmongering going on? That if we can fill our minds full of love, that the worst can be avoided. I do hope and pray that that's the case. And I look at our new cat and she's just a bundle of love. War doesn't mean anything to her. You know, and we think we're superior to animals and plants, the rest of God's creation. But maybe it's the exact opposite. But whatever it is, we need to fill ourselves with love, and if we can fill ourselves with love, I'm sure there is hope, but we need to find it in these difficult times.